Come all of you, come all of us, and bless the one who blesses. Come all of you, come all of us, and bless the one who blesses. Do 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 do. Blessed is the blessed one. Blessed is the giver of blessing. Blessed is this moment now and every now to come. Blessed is the blessed one. Blessed is the giver of blessing. Blessed in this moment now and every now to come. Blessed is the blessed one. Blessed is the giver of blessing. Blessed in this moment now and every blessed come. Do come all of you. Come all of us. Bless the one who blesses. Do 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 do
Shana Tova. Second day, there's a mystique about, maybe not a mystique, but I would say that there is a particular kind of connection about the second day of Rosh Hashanah. First of all, if you're born and raised in a conservative Orthodox shul, of course, the second day is significant. It's another day of worship. It took a while for Reform congregations to even cotton to the idea that there would be a second day observance, because the second day was instituted really as an ancient means by which people could make sure if they blew it when they figured out when the new moon was. And of course, how do you know when the new moon appears? When you can't see the moon, which kind of, it makes it a little difficult. And so this idea was, if you want to be able to observe the holiday and you want to get it right, just in case, the official observer of the moon didn't catch it, you're not going to sin by somehow doing it on the wrong day or not doing it at all. So consequently, as we begin the new year with the month of Tishri, new moon time, another day is added. By the way, it's another reason why there's a second day of Passover. It's the same thing. God forbid you miss the day. Maybe Jews have always been late. I don't know. I mean, I think that's also conceivable. It's not exactly 10 sharp. I did, my first pulpit was as an assistant rabbi in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the senior rabbi, Charles Sherman, would gather us in his office for anything, Shabbat, Chag, didn't matter. We would gather 15 minutes before, and then at about 4 minutes of, he would start, in those days, you would call an 800 number for time and temperature. And he wouldn't even trust his watch. He would dial in, and when it said the time is blank 59, then we would get up and go. It was like I did not continue that tradition. So, and I understand, you know, on the first day, 2 services, people in the parking lot, and even though it was kind of a different deal with the online world and the world present in the sanctuary, the fact is, we try to be pretty punctual, you know. But the second day, the feeling basically is, if we're here, we acknowledge it's a Chag. We acknowledge that we're taking time out of whatever the normal day is, although what is a normal day now anyway, but the normal day, in quotes, and devoting it to this opportunity to be here, to be connected through prayer, to be connected through community, and to share the things that are most significant. I think the notion that Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, is in fact not a description of a political entity, though one could make that argument. I would instead say it's an historical covenant, one that we continue, that we carry together. And it's really such a joyful recognition of this bond that makes us a people. It's what gives us a sense of, of careful, I think they call it in Pilates, core strength, right? It's about core strength. That's what we have. That's what we endeavor to nurture in our lives. Second day is kind of like the first day, only more mellow, I would say. But we daven, we give thanks, we're here. Those of you who are wearing a talit this morning, I invite you to stand where you are and join me in the blessing. Ribono shel olam, on the second day of the new year, we give thanks for life. We give thanks for the power of spirit. We give thanks for the vision that enables us to see where we must go and to go there with resiliency, with courage, with love. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lihitatef batzitzit.
Ma tovu u'halacha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu
To me before we continue on page 130 that you should have your machzorim right by you. If you need one, give a wave and someone will find one for you. And also, am I having mic problems? You look I need to move it over. Little technical difficulty.
Can I get a little more guitar?
In fact, where the heck is it? Sorry, technical detail here.
We'll just play through it like we always do. We're on page 130. Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar. L'chayei olam. Baruch She'amar. Baruch Hu. Baruch Osei Bereshit. Baruch Hamer Ve'osei. Praise be the one who spoke, and the world came to be praised. Be the source of creation. Praise be the one who spoke, and the world came to be praised. Be God, Baruch Hu. Baruch She'amar, L'chayei olam. Baruch She'amar, Baruch Hu.
We still need to adjust. I'm a little verblunged. I was also backwards behind the tie because I've never done this before. Just kidding. All right, how are we doing? We good?
We love the second day.
All right.
Yay.
So what I was going to say before I messed up the second time with the microphone was, within our kahila, within our congregation this morning, many of you are what we call sort of second day veterans. You've been coming for many years doing it, but maybe not. So I know the mask, we're sort of limited, but if you could just sort of turn and see who you're praying with, kind of wave and introduce yourself, turn behind you to the next row, say hello. You might not know who you're with. In this case, you can find out. And as I said, as I perhaps is getting older in my own, issues, but I've thought, the idea that saying to everyone has to stand up, that it can be difficult, and not just because of age, but it could be difficult. I'm not analyzing why, but so my suggestion when I say please rise, you have to understand in parentheses, I'm always saying please rise as you are able, and then in brackets, if you want to. So it's kind of like a thing that you can decide. I get more radically reform, I suppose, as I'm getting older. But the point is not your posture in prayer, right? The point really is your neshama. Where are you focused? And if you're in a focused place in your chair, stay focused. As a kid, I remember going to High Day services and standing for so long. Maybe it was only 5 minutes, but the feeling that I had to stand up was oppressive. And I know sometimes there are periods in the service where the tradition is that we stand for a long time. So I just want to liberate you. And if you have still that child's voice, or you are a child's voice, but if you have the voice that says, I hate standing up, let's not make that an issue. Right? And the same for our folks in the congregation or online. If you're comfortable sitting where you are, stay right where you are. What it's all about is kavanah. What is the intention of the prayer, not the posture of the person who prays. So rise as you are able, interested, care to, and that's all I'm going to say. Page 142. Baruch Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Ve'al me'arei or shasita yifaru chasela Baruch ata Adonai
Shemo.
Yotzer ha'me'orot.
Amen. Please be seated. Avodah Rabbah, 146.
Avarabah
Avtanu Adonai Eloheinu Chemla Gedola V'Tera Chamalta Leinu Chemla Gedola V'Tera Chamalta Leinu והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו ליאהבה וליראה את שמך ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל שם קודשך הגדול והנורא פתחנו נגילה ונשמחה נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך
ברוך אתה אדוני
שמו.
הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Amen. Shema is on page 150.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Page 152.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavcha hayom al levavecha ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אלוהיכם אמת. Page 164. מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורות תהילות אוסף אלה שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמלכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם Ezrat Yisrael, Uvtechinu Mecha, Yehuda v'Yisrael. Go'alinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kadosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
Amen. It's interesting how prayers that we are so familiar with, that are really written deep in memory, the kinds of, particularly their melodies, that they just stick. And over time, certain melodies become the melody. So if you don't hear a prayer one particular way, it's like, that doesn't count, right? Because you didn't sing it the way the cantor sang it in my shul when I was growing up. That is it, the only version. And it's always shocking for people to learn that, in fact, if you look up, I guess you can Google anything, including melodies for Mi Chamocha on Rosh Hashanah, and you might think, well, there's just this da-da-da-da. Well, there's da-da-da-da if you're kind of an Ashkenazic Jew, Ashken normative, I think they call it now. But if you're a Sephardic Jew, it's not going to sound that way. And if you're a Jew who has your origins in Morocco or in Iraq, it's going to sound different too. And in fact, the truth is, the mystery of music and the way that we use it in the Reform movement particularly, somewhat in the conservative, but I think if you grew up in an Orthodox synagogue, there was a lot of attention paid really to these organized voices. Orthodox synagogues do have choirs on High Holy. Did you grow up with a choir on High Holy Days?
For a few years, but then they got rid of it. Yeah.
Because it was too...
My mom was in it.
Yeah, so for some of you who grew up in Orthodox synagogues, there was a choir, but basically it's a lot of davening. It's like the melody, in many cases in an Orthodox shul, is secondary to the content of the book itself, which I know for us, it's so counterintuitive. Because for us, I think it's fair to say, it's about the music that carries us. And the music almost transcends whatever the text is. Because frankly, a lot of us don't speak Hebrew. We don't know it fluently. And if we do, in fact, read the English translation next to the prayer, sometimes we're going, I don't want to say that. Like, what? No, I don't believe that. But the melody of the prayer is the thing that lifts me, that transforms me. I've always found that to be just such an interesting thing about the way that Judaism has grown, particularly in America, and then the American Jewish idea of music has actually gone to modern Israel and has inspired lots of new liturgical music in Israel that is about the melody, right? So it's interesting how it's woven its way in. And I think about the need for both of these things, which is why when we put together a High Holy Day service, it's a combination of contemporary music, contemporary melodies, but also what I guess we would call, at least in our experience, the oldie but goodies, right? The things that resonate, the things that define time. And I think the Amidah that we do, it starts on 166, that we go from Adonai Sfatai into Avot and to Gevurot and Unatana Tokef. All of it is really transfixing and puts us in a frame of mind and puts us in a frame of mind that is, I think, if we think about consciousness, we realize consciousness is not only that which we experience in the here and now, but somehow consciousness is able to scroll back and give us a connection to something we once had. It's more than memory. It's about putting oneself in a different place. At least that's the spiritual attempt. That's the thing for which we reach, we try to reach. We're on page 166.
Today
Please rise.
We're going back to our Temple Beth Avodah traditional melody for Adonai
So
Sifatai.
2001 anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Ya na 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 ya ya ya
Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya ya. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la. Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 na. Satai tifkach. Na 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 na. Ufi agid tehilatecha. Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 satai tiftach. Na 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 ufi agid. Ufi agid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Ve'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanara Elyon
Gomel chasadim tovim V'konei hakol V'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot U'mevii geula livnei v'nehem Leman shemo bi'ahava Zochreinu lechayim Melech hafetz b'chayim V'chotvenu b'sefer hachayim Lemancha Elohim chayim Melech ozer Moshiach u'magen Baruch atah Adonai
Shmo.
Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah
Amen.
Atah gibor le'olam Adonai Mechayei hakol atah
Rav lehoshia morid hatal Mechalkel chaim bechesed Mechayev metim berachamim rabim Somech noflim verofeh cholim Umatir asurim Umekayem emunato Lishenei afar Michamocha Baal Gevurot Umidomelach Melech Meimit Umechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua Michamocha El HaRachamim Zocher Yitzur
אדוני
שמו.
מחיי הכל.
Amen. Page 174.
ונתן תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום, ובו תינשא מלכותך, ויכון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת.
178.
בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון.
כמה יעבורון וכמה יברהון, מי חיה ומי ימות, מי וקיצו ומי לא וקיצו.
בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון.
מי באש ומי במים, מי בחרב ומי בחיה, מי ברעב ומי בצמא.
בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון.
מי ברעש ומי במגפה, מי בחניקה ומי בסקילה, מי ינוח ומי ינוע, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף.
בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון.
מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי יעני ומי יאשר, מי יושפל ומי ירום. בראש השנה
יכתבון, יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון.
On Rosh Hashanah, we plunge like swimmers into a sea of words. On Yom Kippur, the sea rises, then crests, and we emerge, sealed by the wax, warmed by the fire of a braided candle. The new year is like a trailhead opening wide before us. The day of fasting, narrow, breathless, so quick to close. We contemplate a new year, and this we know. Some of us will live, and some of us will die. Some will die young, and some very old. Some by water, and some by fire. Some by sword, and some by beast. some by hunger and some by thirst, some by plague and some by earthquake, some by stoning and some by strangling. Some of us will feel at ease, some will be restless. Some will have peace of mind, some will have strife. Some will be tranquil, some will be tormented. Some will be raised high, some will be brought low. Some will have riches, some will be impoverished. Even so, the way we act, the way we speak, the way we meet God's image in ourselves and in others, these things have great power to make our lives matter. Therefore, let us make whole the broken shards, green and thick the withering grass. Let the wind fill us with urgency for life. Let dreams give birth to justice and goodness. God of holiness, God of hope, let us glimpse your truth as we attach our hopes to yours.
U'tshuva, u'tfilah, u'tzedakah, ma'avirin et roha ha'gezerah.
Page 184.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר,
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ, כבודו.
אדיר, אדירנו אדוני, אדוננו אדיר, שמך בכל הארץ.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
Please be seated. We continue silently.
sim shalom, tova uvracha, sim shalom, tova uvracha. Chen v'chesed, chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Chen v'chesed, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, v'rachamim. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, sim shalom, tova uvracha. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'amecha, sim shalom, tova uvracha, sim shalom, tova uvracha. Sim shalom, tova uvracha.
If you'll rise, we're on page 224. Avinu Malkeinu, we stand in awe. We draw close in love. Avinu Malkeinu, the power that passes through us and pervades all things. Avinu Malkeinu, the divine that is present within and among us. Avinu Malkeinu, we speak this sacred truth aloud. Avinu Malkeinu, we stand as one accountable for our sins. Avinu Malkeinu, we yearn for true compassion for our children most of all. Avinu Malkeinu, may we resist the ravages of illness, fear, and despair. Avinu Malkeinu, let us summon courage to withstand our enemies. Avinu Malkeinu, let the goodness of this gift of life be engraved upon our hearts. Avinu Malkeinu, may we taste anew the sweetness of each day. Avinu Malkeinu, let us wake up to the blessing already in our grasp. However small our deeds, let us see their power to heal. May we save lives through compassion, generosity, and justice.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'aneinu, ki ein banu masim, aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, ve'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu v'hanenu, ki ein banu ma'asim.
I don't want you to, since you're standing, I don't want you to sit down now because we're going to shift attention for a moment as we continue with our Torah service. If you'll notice in the back of the room, there is a glass case. In that glass case is our Holocaust Torah, one of the many Sifrei Torah that was saved by the Allies when there was a warehouse found with literally thousands of Torahs, many of them desecrated, and a variety of other ornaments and books, and just the Nazis would go in before they would burn the synagogues to the ground, would ransack them first, the idea ultimately being that when the Third Reich was successful and succeeded in conquering the planet, that they would have a museum based on the people that they exterminated. And so they were collecting all of these items to be put on display one day. When they were found, the Westminster Synagogue in England took responsibility for taking care of them, took them all to England, and some of them were damaged beyond any kind of, not only just repair, even to use in a memorial way. They were just simply too damaged, and they were buried, as is the custom in Jewish life, that when a Torah has been destroyed or damaged beyond use or repair, it is buried in a cemetery next to other people, as are prayer books, etc. In fact, one of the great blessings when my mother died and was buried, that the congregation that she belonged to in Middletown that I grew up in also put in her grave old prayer books. And it was, to me, a great blessing, a great honor to her. These are holy items that have to be loved and cared for, which is why we do it that way. And so the Holocaust Torah used to live in our hallway, this one that we got from Bernie Julius, who arranged it all, one of our early presidents of Beth Avodah. You can see his name on the plaque prominently displayed out front. You will see he was one of our presidents, and he made sure that we got a Westminster Torah. But I'll tell you more about it. I'm going to have you standing here. We're going to go get the Torah. I'll tell you a little bit more, then we'll talk about the fact that we have this extraordinary reading. And if you want to follow the Torah reading that will be happening shortly, there are Torahs in the back there that you're welcome to open up to, I think, page 18. I don't know, what is the page in there? If you could find out, because I forgot it, didn't have my book. That was the easier thing to go, but you might even have it in your machzor. But in the meantime,
We're on 227.
Susan and Jamie, I think I'm going to go get the Torah.
And we're on page 227 for the
Thank you.
Torah service. Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai, v'ein k'ma'asecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch, leolam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim heitiv avirtzonecha et Sion. Tifnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tifnei chomot Yerushalayim. Adon Olamim. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, 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 El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Adonai, Notzer Chesed Alafim, Nosei Avav V'Sha V'Chata V'Nakeh, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, 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 El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai.
I'm going to break custom a little bit, and I'm going to walk with the Torah during this part. So I'm just warning our camera people.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo, Gadlu Adonai Yiti, Uneromema Shemo Yachdav. Al Shlosha Divarim, Al Shlosha Al Shlosha Divarim, Ha'olam, Ha'olam Omed. Al Shlosha Divarim, call the colon. Al Shlosha Divarim, Al Shlosha Divarim, Ha'olam, Ha'olam Omed. Al HaTorah ve'al Avodah ve'al Gmilut Chasadim. Al HaTorah ve'al Avodah ve'al Gmilut Chasadim. Al Shlosha Divarim, Al Shlosha Divarim, Al Shlosha Divarim, Ha'olam, Ha'olam Omed. I am sure it never occurred to the scribe who wrote each letter of this Torah, probably, we think, maybe 120 years ago. If the scribe would have imagined that the Torah would still be in a congregation, it might have been much. And I think about the Jews from this community who saw their synagogue destroyed and who were in the ghettos of Europe. When they saw their Torah thrown onto a truck and driven away, what were they imagining? What were they imagining would happen next to this specific scroll? For many years, it languished as they were all, the Sifrei Torah were cataloged and examined. And somehow this one, we have our official Czech memorial scroll, and it has its very special identification. and it's in our charge. It's on permanent loan to us. And for years, the word was once synagogues received them, they were not sold. Synagogues paid for the postage, which had to get it here in one piece. The idea was that it would be a memorial, and it sat, as I said, for decades in the hallway behind in a showcase. And then the administration of the Westminster Torahs changed, and they said, if you don't open it and move move the scroll around, the parchment will basically turn to dust, that it has to be used for it not to fall apart, which I thought was a great sermon, I haven't given that one yet, but it's a good sermon. Also good for aging, So anyway, this Torah, so they said you should, open them up and literally give the parchment air. It's not temperature control. We don't have it in an archival condition. So there will be wear just by virtue of it being in the atmosphere that is not being controlled, given all that. So we've used it now a few times, and it went from being a sacred memorial piece that we would bring into the sanctuary on Yizkor, one of the most moving Yizkor services anywhere in the world, I think, when we come into the sanctuary and carry the Torah. And I think of our emeritus Rabbi of blessed memory, Robert Miller, who handed down that tradition to me with trust. And I see us all here now, and with this new change in administration, it was said to open it up, and we thought, what a perfect time on the second day of Rosh Hashanah to read the story of creation. Not only that, see, if the scribe had already been wondering who would be reading from it now, he would, and most definitively he, would never have imagined that there would be women, 7 women, reading from the Torah, including one of them online. He wouldn't be able to handle it for a whole number. I think the online part would be easier for him to imagine than 7 women reading from Torah. Women reading from the Torah in the stretch of Jewish history is a very new phenomenon. And it is an extraordinary statement about the resiliency of Jewish women over generations to claim the voice that has always been theirs. Though there are some places where women are not permitted, not only not to chant from it, not to hold it, not to even be in the same seats with men who are consigned to a place away from. But it is a gladdening phenomenon that here we sit together, we pray together, we share the mitzvah, the obligation to read from Torah, amongst extraordinary, strong, varied, honored women. And with that, I'm going to invite our Torah readers, if you will, please come over here to this side, all of our Torah readers. And what we'll do is the congregation will, in a moment, we will say the Torah blessing, and we're going to open the Torah, and our Torah readers, one by one, will chant, and we will have our our online chanter with us as well. And so I think second day Rosh Hashanah, Torah from the Holocaust collection, I think we should all rise for this Aliyah and chant it out loud together. So if you would all please stand. And if you are all ready, and you are the lead-off, correct? We need to have a yad here. We don't have a yad. Hold on. Missing a yod. Got to have a yod. Uh-oh. You know, second A, a little less formal, you know.
I think we moved it yesterday.
Oh, in the yacht store. Perfect, thank you.
Here we go.
So Beth Kozin, our leadoff, if you would take the yod, point to where you're sharding to affirm, not that it's hard to find, but, and the reading is on page 330. So you can touch there. Then, women readers, if you'd like to come over, each of you, and touch the beginning of where Beth will be reading, the big bet. And are we clipping reader by reader with the lapel mic? Got it.
Just gonna hold it up.
Let's chant. Baruch hu et Adonai Amvorach. Baruch Adonai Amvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Amen. Please be seated, everybody.
Bereshit barach Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz v'haaretz hayita tohu vavohu v'hoshe al pnei tehum v'ruach Elohim merehefet al pnei hamayim v'yomer Elohim yehi or v'ira Elohim et haor kito v'yavdel Elohim ben haor uven hahoshe v'yikra Elohim laor yom v'lehoshe kara laila v'hi erev v'hi voher yom echad.
I'm certified.
I trust you, Hazel. Hazel Sivar, reader number 2.
I'll be the clipper.
Where are we? Vayomer Elohim yehi rakia betoch hamayim v'hi mavdil bein mayim lamayim vayas Elohim et harakia vayavdel bein hamayim asher מתחת לרקיע ובין המים אשר מעל לרקיע ויהי כן ויקרא אלוהים לרקיע שמיים ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שני.
Vayomer Elohim, ikavu hamayim, mitahat hashamayim el makom echad, v'tera'eh hayabasha vayhi chen, vayikra Elohim layabasha eretz ulmikvei hamayim, kara hayamim, vayar Elohim ki tov. Vayomer Elohim, Tache haaretz deshe, Eser Masriya Zera, Eitz peri, Ohose peri, Leminoho, Asher zarovoho al haaretz vayhi chen, Vatotze haaretz deshe, Eser Masriya Zera leminehu ועץ עושה פרי, אשר זרעו למיניהו, וירא אלוהים כי טוב, ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר, יום שלישי.
ויאמר אלוהים יהי מאורות ברכיה השמיים להבדיל בין היום ובין הלילה, והיו לאותות ומועדים ולימים ושנים. והיו למורות ברכיה השמיים להאיר על הארץ, ויהי כן. ויעש אלוהים את שני המורות הגדולים, את המאור הגדול לממשלת היום, ואת המאור הקטון לממשלת הלילה, ואת הכוכבים. ויתן אותם אלוהים ברכיה השמיים להאיר על הארץ, ולמשול ביום ובלילה, ולהבדיל בין האור ובין החושך. וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר, יום רביעי.
That was Rachel White, the previous Aliyah online. Deborah Cross is our next.
And our
Torah.
newest reader, too.
Well, of course.
It's very special. Where are we? Okay.
Right there. Vayomer Elohim yishratzu hamayim sheret nefesh chaya ve'ov ya'ofech al haaretz al penei rakia hashamayim. Vayivra Elohim et hataninim hagdolim ve'et kol nefesh hachaya haromeset asher shartzu hamayim leminehem ve'et kol of kanav leminehu vayar Elohim ki tov vayivarech otam Elohim lemor peru orvu umilu et hamayim bayamim v'ha'ov yirev ba'aretz vayhi erev vayhi boker yom chamishi.
Shkoich.
Shkochem.
And Kalis, day 6.
Vayomer Elohim totzei haaretz nefesh chaya lemina v'hema v'remes vayto eretz lemina vayhi chen vayas Elohim et chayot haaretz lemina ואת הבהמה למינה ואת כל רמס האדמה למיניהו וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויאמר אלוהים נעשה אדם בצלמנו כדמותנו וירדו בדגת הים ובעוף השמיים ובבהמה ובכל הארץ ובכל הרומס על הארץ. ויברא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו, בצלם אלוהים ברא אותו, זכר ונקבה ברא אותם. ויברך אותם אלוהים, ויאמר להם אלוהים, פרו ורבו ומילאו את הארץ וכבשוה ורדו בדגת הים ובעוף השמיים ובכל חיה הרומסת על הארץ. ויאמר אלוהים, הנה נתתי לכם את כל עשב זורע זרע אשר על פני כל הארץ ואת כל העץ אשר בו פרי עץ זורע זרע לכם יהיה לאוכלה ולכל חיית הארץ ולכל עוף השמיים ולכל חומס על הארץ אשר בו נפש חיה את כל ירק עשב לאוכלה ויהי כן. ויברא אלוהים את כל אלוהים את כל אשר עשה והנה טוב מאוד ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום השישי.
It's a lot of Torah.
Beautiful reading.
Merle Jacobs, our Shabbat reader.
ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם, ויכל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישפוט ביום השביעי בכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי וקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות.
If everyone would please rise. Ladies, if you'd like to come and touch the Torah where Merle just completed reading.
You're going to lift it.
Right here.
You're going to lift it.
Yeah, we're going to lift it. I'm going to, yeah. I forgot to have them do that. Right there. Another way of signing off officially. You know?
I'm across the table.
And I'm going to say that this is Hagbah time. Usually I'd make a big deal about lifting it up. And
Second lesson.
it's very heavy. Second of all, the possibility of it ripping before I do, it's part of half. So it'll be a modified Hagbah, just so everybody knows. And it is all on the left hand. Okay?
Second blessing.
Second blessing.
Baruch
Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. If you would just hold that for me, thank you.
V'zot haTorah asher Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai ve'ad Moshe. Yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la la. Thank you, Torah readers. Yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la. Yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la.
All of you, thank you so much for giving us the blessing of Torah, for taking the time to learn, taking the time, the courage to chant, and to do it from the sacred text that we bring out, especially on this day. You ennoble this whole day, so thank you. Thank all of you. I first met Matt Aronson. He was just a kid 25 years ago. And from his time at Beth Avodah, he and his family, his sister, his brother, all of them are very successful human beings out in the world. And I know that Steve and Risa Aronson are very proud of their children, and I have to mention their grandchildren as well. And it was with a great sense of joy that when we months ago were talking about who would be a good, appropriate, strong person to talk to us on the second day from the congregation, who might that be? And God knows we have so many people who do so many interesting things. By the way, second season of the podcast, TBA now, coming out soon. But as you saw throughout last year in the podcast, that there were many people that do really extraordinarily interesting things. Well, what Matt Aronson does is not only interesting, but it is part of, and I know the term is overused, but I'm going to use it, the practice of tikkun olam, of fixing the brokenness of the world. And Matt does it in a very particular way. He's always been a person with a deep and ongoing sense of social justice. He's always had it, always been involved, always this open, vulnerable, loving heart with an expectation that justice be done. Currently, Matt is very much involved in the problem of youth homelessness. It's something that many of us, most of us, are shielded from. If we're not in social services, if we don't work with families who are victims of abuse, if we don't work in the school system, if we're a couple steps away from that, then it is likely that you have no idea. It's a hidden problem. But it is a serious problem all over the world. Well, there's little we can do to tackle a problem that immense. But we begin in a place of close proximity. And what Matt has done and will be doing and how he'll describe it, I hope will engage you. And what I hope will come from this is not an interesting exposition of youth homelessness in the Boston area, but is the beginning of your saying, oh my God, what can we do? What is our part? And Matt will give us some ideas about that. And right now, through the magic of the screen behind me and the crew in front of me who enable all of the online work to happen, it's an honor, Matt Aronson, to welcome you back to your temple in the online world of Temple Beth Avodah. And we look forward to hearing more about what you have to say and how we can be allies in your work.
Thank you, Rabbi Shana Tova, everybody. The honor is all mine. I am so excited to be here and to share my work with you. I really want to be there in person. The downside is I can't be, but the positive side is I get to show off. The reason why I am not is I have a beautiful 3-month-old Riley at home, and I get to spend a little bit of Rosh Hashanah here. And so she's going to be my emotional support during the speech. There you go. Thank you. So before I begin, I'm actually going to ask you all to do a little bit of work. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and just for a minute or two, talk about what a home is. What a home is. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 minutes. What a home is. Go for it. All right. If we were in person, it would be more engaging, a lot of activities. Because this is Temple Beth Avodah, I'm going to guess that more than a few of you got philosophical very quickly about what a home is. And at a basic level, a home is a set of walls and a roof, a kitchen and a bedroom. But a home is also where you eat and where you sleep. It's where you get ready for work, where you keep your medicine and go to the bathroom. And a home is a feeling. It is safety and security, family connections, warmth, and relaxation. And so while we talk about youth homelessness today, which is literally the lack of a consistent place to sleep at night, I want you to think about these other things. Because to experience homelessness is to lose all of these other things. Now, I love what I do. And I also love bringing amazing people like you all into my world. Temple Beth Avodah is filled with some of the most incredible people. And I know that this is a community capable of affecting significant change. And so I have committed, as the rabbi said, to working with the TBA community all year on social action and to challenge you to join me and the rabbi in that year-long effort to learn about and then take action in the fight to end youth and young adult homelessness in Greater Boston. So what is it that I do that I love so much? Every day, I work with stakeholders around the country to prevent and end youth and young adult homelessness. And when I talk about youth and young adults, I am talking specifically about young people under the age of 25. That may include an individual who's 10 or 15 or 21. It also includes couples or partners who are surviving together. So like a 16 and a 17-year-old, a 20 and a 22-year-old. And it includes young parents. So it could be a 17-year-old single mom, a 24-year-old single dad with a young child, as long as no one in the household is 25 or older. And when I talk about homelessness, I mean young people who are on the streets or places not meant for sleeping, like a car or a bus terminal, an abandoned building, or under a bridge. Young people living in shelters or other homelessness housing. Young people who are couch surfing, and so when they're moving from place to place and they never know where they will go next or how long they can stay in any one place. And finally, young people living in unsafe situations, fleeing domestic violence, mental and physical abuse, sexual or commercial exploitation. And so I work with cities and counties and states, including the state of Massachusetts, helping them to develop strategic plans to prevent and end youth and young adult homelessness. I coach their leadership, I train their staff, I conduct formal needs assessments. I help them incorporate young people into decision-making structures as full partners and to start youth action boards. And I also work on innovative projects, so things that bring new and promising strategies that I believe in and evidence suggests will help to move the field forward. I love what I do for at least 4 reasons, some of which I hope will resonate with you. So the first is the youth and young adults experiencing homelessness that I get to work with. These are the most intelligent, compassionate, creative, resilient, and inspiring people I have ever met. They have made every project I have ever worked on better. Their insights are searing, and it is amazing to watch them develop into formidable leaders themselves. They are also the most humble and magnanimous people I have ever met, which is probably the most inspiring aspect. Several years ago, I had the privilege to attend the college graduation of a young man that I had mentored. And after the ceremony, I asked him what he wanted to do with his life. He was actually headed to law school. And he said, "Matt, I want to make sure that every young person is as lucky as I was." Now, this is a young person who experienced homelessness most of his life, experienced physical and mental trauma. He even lived out of his car for a time while in college, and I was mad because he didn't tell me. And I said to Anthony, "What do you mean lucky? If anyone could say that they did it on their own, it would be you." But he said, no, Matt, you don't understand. I found Sasha Bruce, which is the youth organization he worked with. I found this person and that mentor and you. I'm lucky. And there are many more young people who are just as smart and deserving as me who never had those opportunities. And man, do I find that inspiring. The second reason I love what I do is that it just feels right to help people every day. And I consider that a privilege, that I feel this way, that I owe at least in part to growing up at Temple Beth Avodah. I had amazing role models in my grandparents, my Nana who's watching, my parents, and my Auntie Bunny, who were always volunteering as greeters and ushers, building the sukkah with the Brotherhood, supporting every play, event, and blood drive. They were on the school board. They were in temple leadership. Like most of your families, for the folks who are watching today, we participated with the community in food drives. We had tzedakah boxes. I remember raising money during Passover for the candy sales that we did in Hebrew school. And the extra stories in the prayer books that I used to read, the poems and psalms, the sermons from Rabbi, all were about mitzvah, tzedakah, and tikkun olam. And so these are the foundational values that I'm lucky to say were normalized for me in our community. And so now they just feel right, and they make my job that much more satisfying. The third reason is I get to use the skills and talents that I have and enjoy. The community organizing and relationship building I learned as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine, the facilitation skills I learned as a teacher and coach. I get to problem solve and help communities tell their stories. And as often as I can, I still try to work one-on-one with young people. And the great thing about this work is that there is room for a broad range of skills and backgrounds, not just social workers, housing or healthcare specialists. And I can promise that there is a need for your skills and talents in this movement. Finally, I love working on a big challenge with a sense of urgency. Now, that is also something that keeps me up at night, along with my 3-month-old daughter. Thanks to comprehensive and groundbreaking research conducted a few years ago, we know that pre-pandemic, 1 out of 10 18 to 24-year-olds and 1 out of 30 13 to 17-year-olds experience some form of homelessness in America each year. I want to let that sink in for a sec. 1 out of 10 18 to 24-year-olds and 1 out of 30 13 to 17-year-olds experience some form of homelessness in the wealthiest country in the world. That means about 4.2 million young people experience homelessness in America. And if we translate that to Massachusetts, it's between 70 and 90,000. And in Newton and South Brookline, that means it's between 1,200 and 1,500. And even if we think our community is 2 or even 4 times better than the national average, that still means that hundreds of young people experience homelessness in this community every year. And that was before the pandemic, which we don't even know the full effects of yet. After talking about this with my dad last night, it reminded him how shocked he was when he learned that while volunteering with the Boys and Girls Club in Newtonville, he was working with young people experiencing homelessness. Some other things that we know are that there's no difference in the prevalence of youth and young adult homelessness between urban, suburban, and rural spaces. It sometimes looks different. You may have more couch surfing, for example, in Newton or Brookline because we don't have youth shelters or youth homelessness services. And so you'll see that experience where the few shelters are in Boston or Cambridge or Framingham. We also know that homelessness affects certain populations disproportionately and more severely than average. LGBTQ young people and Black and brown young people are vastly overrepresented, as are young people with histories of child welfare and juvenile justice involvement. We know that young people in poverty and without a high school diploma and young parents are at greater risk, that we are serving lots of young people with histories of domestic violence or trafficking. And we know that even though the average young person we see in our homelessness system, so those young people who actually receive services are over 20, they report their first experience with homelessness as occurring before they were 18. And so it means that homelessness starts young and we usually don't see them until they've already had significant homelessness experience. Now, the consequences of homelessness can be severe. So living on the streets is maybe obvious, and frequently moving risks sexual and physical violence and trauma. According to one report, young people experiencing homelessness have higher rates of PTSD than veterans. They are more than 5 times more likely to experience suicidal ideation or attempt suicide. They're more likely to be trafficked. Homelessness leads to lower graduation rates and school performance. It's hard to find a job and keep a job. It's harder to stay healthy. They're at risk for addiction after using substances as a coping mechanism while experiencing homelessness, and they're at risk of early death. Another recent research initiative estimated that each day a young person experiences homelessness or is waiting in limbo for a resource to become available, which can take many months, that increases their risk of future homelessness by 2% each day, suggesting that today's young people experiencing homelessness may become tomorrow's older folks chronically experiencing homelessness. And even if that is not compelling for you, in the wealthiest country in the world, homelessness unresolved is very expensive. In emergency services and other community resources, it's expensive, as well as in the lost productivity and creativity that those young people may have otherwise added to the world. And yet, despite that daunting, angering, and somewhat bleak picture that I just painted for you, perhaps made significantly worse by the pandemic, I have found a lot of reasons to be hopeful for our movement. 10 years ago, we knew very little about youth and young adult homelessness. Thanks to investments from the government and private philanthropy, we now have a detailed understanding of the problem and are building an evidence base for which solutions actually make a difference. While it is nowhere near enough, there is more funding for youth and young adult homelessness every year at the federal, state, and local levels. The state of Massachusetts has actually stepped up pretty well for the last 5 years in making meaningful, flexible investments in community efforts to end youth and young adult homelessness. I also think that we are more aware of youth and young adult homelessness than we ever have been, about the housing crisis in general, as well as systemic issues like racism and homophobia that contribute to homelessness. And that has brought in more people in sectors than we ever had. So not just traditional homelessness folks, but schools and colleges, first responders, child welfare and criminal justice, businesses, and philanthropy. And finally, I'm hopeful because of the number of young people with lived experience leading the movement. 2 of them run the largest national campaign to end youth and young adult homelessness. It's called Away Home America. There are more youth action boards in every community around the country than ever, and they are beginning to take over roles at all levels of the work. So where do you all fit in? What is the role of Temple Beth Avodah in all of this, as Rabbi was alluding to? The first thing is we can build our awareness. We can confront stereotypes and commit to paying attention and taking an active role. Youth and young adult homelessness is way too easy to ignore in our country. Frequently, I ask people during sessions that I lead to tell me what they think of immediately after I say the word homeless. And they usually talk about an older man living on the streets, drunk or high, and begging for money. And they say it with a lack of empathy and deservedness. And to be honest, I have those same preconceived notions. While it is far from the norm, homelessness can look like that. And that person is every bit as deserving of a home as anyone else. Homelessness on average looks very different. It is far more often a single mom in her early 20s with 1 to 3 young children who works or is looking for work. And it is a lack of community connections and many, many failed systems that lead to a terrible fate that is tough to get out of. It is something that we need to confront and can do something about. And that's why Rabbi and I talked about us first doing a lot of learning together this year. Next, we can take time to consider our own skills, roles, capacities, and interests. As I mentioned, we have this amazing community. We are doctors and professors, politicians and entrepreneurs. We've got engineers and journalists and our amazing young people. And everyone has something that is valuable to the movement. We can volunteer our time at local food banks or the Y2Y Youth Shelter in Harvard Square. We can mentor young people either one-on-one or as part of a program that builds permanent connections. We can contribute our legal advice to young people who need help with documentation or evictions. Businesses can work with employment organizations to hire young people. We can create media that brings awareness and challenges stereotypes. We can champion state legislation and local ordinances that create housing and fight against NIMBYism and those laws that criminalize homelessness. And we can use our development expertise to build units and rent to this population. For those of you who are philanthropists or who would like to donate in any amount, there are plenty of important opportunities for investment in our community. Now, generally, I think about investments in three categories. You can fund more of what exists, you can fund efficiency and improvements, and you can fund innovation. There are lots of worthy organizations that need our support. They are doing incredible work, and I donate to many of them every single year. We need massive investments in housing programs and services. And not only is that a great role for government to play, we will not end youth and young adult homelessness by doing what we are already doing and expecting a different result. Now, I spend most of my days in the efficiency and improvement space, helping communities build better systems, collaborate in new ways, increase staff capacity, standardize and streamline processes. And while that can take communities a long, long way, I am a true believer in what we call the coordinated community response. Eventually, you can only be so coordinated and so efficient. So to end youth and young adult homelessness, a challenge in its most recent incarnation that has been with us since the 1980s and in its modern form since at least the 1500s, we need new and innovative strategies that will help us shift from managing youth and young adult homelessness to ending it. And this is also the best space for private philanthropy and public-private partnerships, especially when it is focused on areas that the field has identified as underserved. So I want to just give you one important example that I'm involved with, and it addresses a few of the things that I've talked about today. How important it is to get youth and young adults the help they need quickly, include flexibility to meet their diverse needs, address issues of youth empowerment and equity, and be efficient with our resources to serve a heck of a lot more young people than we are today. Bay Cash is a direct cash transfer program for youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. Some of you may be familiar with cash transfer projects. There was one in Stockton, California. There's even one in Chelsea, Mass. There will be one in Cambridge. This is something like that, but more substantial and longer lasting. I have been working on this for over a year now with partners like the United Way and Y2Y, the state's Executive Office of Health and Human Services, and even my mom, who is a board member of the initiative, which has been fabulous. We are going to test whether regular modest cash payments over 2 years' time, plus targeted supports like peer navigation and financial coaching, are effective in ending youth and young adult homelessness. If I had one tool to add to the toolkit of every community in America, it would be direct cash transfers, no question. While there are no silver bullets, this could be the most important intervention in our fight to prevent and end youth and young adult homelessness. But it doesn't exist yet anywhere in the United States for this population. There is another pilot on the way in New York City that I'm a part of, but no one else is doing it yet. That is despite the overwhelming evidence that direct cash transfers are effective in improving a broad array of outcomes for people with the highest barriers to success. It is one of the most well-researched interventions in the world, but in America, there are a few biases and cultural aspects that get in the way. We don't like giving money to people. We don't usually trust poor people. We don't tend to trust Black and brown people. We don't trust young people, and we don't trust folks experiencing homelessness. I have these same unconscious biases too, because I grew up in this country as well. And that's a lot to overcome, including the belief that money will just be wasted. But all of the evidence that we can find has said the opposite, that when you give poor folks money unconditionally through a cash transfer program, they spend it on their basic needs. They spend it on food and clothing, on housing and healthcare, debts and education. They don't waste it any more than any other human being, and likely less than well-resourced folks do. I certainly can think of several times over the past month that I made a poor financial decision. And what's more, cash transfers allow young people to meet their needs quickly by convincing maybe a relative to let them live with them, or for a little rent to find a roommate quickly, rather than spending the 3 or 6 or sometimes 9-month average waits to move into a housing unit once you've already qualified for a program, all the time increasing your risk of future homelessness. It allows us to spend the funding on young people's individual needs without red tape or irrelevant spending prescriptions. It builds youth and young adult self-efficacy through trust and practice, and allows them to avoid some of the implicit racism, homophobia, and transphobia by removing middlemen and gatekeepers between them and their needs. And it's way more cost-effective to run a direct cash transfer program, even with the offered supports, than a traditional housing program. And so we can serve a lot more young people. But to make this sustainable, to overcome those biases that I mentioned, we really need evidence. Direct cash transfers have actually come in and out of fashion several times in this country over the last 150 years. Basic income was thought to be all but inevitable by economists in the early 20th century. Richard Nixon, if any of you have been around long enough, almost signed universal basic income into law in the early 1970s. And we have had several other generous cash transfer programs come and go as their momentum has waned. And so we are building in rigorous evaluation to Bay Cash by running a random controlled trial. This is the gold standard of evaluations. So that when we are done, I can go to the State House and to cities and towns and tell them this works with a high level of confidence, and you need to make this available for the long term for the young people who want it. Unfortunately, there is a catch. In order to run a random control trial that returns results with a high level of statistical significance, I won't get into all the numbers, which are way over my head anyways, you need to start big. You need to serve a lot of young people. So we can't start with a small pilot of just a handful of youth and young adults. And this means we need, in order to convince public entities to make a significant investment in the future, we need to work with private philanthropy to raise a lot of money to conduct a pilot that will return us those significant results. And if you are interested in Bay Cash after hearing this, please come and find me and my mom, Risa, because I would love to tell you more about this and get you involved. Now, there are several other initiatives and innovative efforts that I love and think are critical for our field, particularly those in the mental health space, where we need to reach people consistently in ways that help evade stigma and are culturally competent, and in the permanent connection space, where young people can build non-clinical, lifelong relationships with people in their community who will help them to sustain successful lives. And I really look forward to exploring each of those with all of you during the coming year. Over the next few weeks, I will be working with Rabbi and the Temple Beth Avodah staff to schedule opportunities for the community, including our Temple's youth groups, to engage in this work that I really do love so much. We hope to set up opportunities for both learning and action, and I would strongly encourage you to join us. If anything, I hope that a little bit of my love and passion have rubbed off on you today, that some of it resonated with you and maybe even inspired you to get involved yourself. If even a handful of us come together, we are sure to make a significant difference. Thank you so much. Shana Tova, this has really been a special honor to share my work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much for being with us on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And yes, indeed, you've given us so much to think about and anticipate. And I think in terms of going into a new year with hope, to give us a target, a place to focus, this I think is a blessing. And it probably sounds condescending, but I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud of who you've become. And I know I speak for your grandmother and for your parents and your siblings, and not to mention for your wife and that baby. And we send you our love, and we'll be seeing you soon. We'll be seeing you very soon. Shana Tova. A Beth Avodah boy. Folks, if you would please rise for Aleinu. Page 286.
Aleinu
לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. It has been such an honor and blessing to pray with you on this new day, second day of a new year. I hope that Matt's presentation was an invitation to engage, an invitation to pursue justice. Without getting overtly political, I want to say how proud I am to be from the state of Massachusetts. Not entirely without fault or issues, but I feel overall that we live in a state, in a city with leadership that directs us to look out for others. The irony did not escape me that the 7 readers for our second day, all women whose rights of self-determination are assured in this state. And the fact that that is no longer the case in at least one other state that I know of, and other states probably to follow, is very frightening. And I think it directs us all the more to pursue justice. And I think as a community to do it together, to gather our strength. I always find it to focus our concerns is always stronger than our individual acts, as good as they are, of sending a check or volunteering or working in another place. I think the more we can bring ourselves together to pursue this together, the more justice can be done, the more we can make the new year a good year for all of us. On this second day of the new year, we think of those who are not with us, whom death has taken in this season and in years past. We think about them with love and with reverence. And we hope and pray that their memories will forever be a blessing. The Mourner's Kaddish is on page 292. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, bi'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayichon v'yomeichon u'chayei dechal Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olami almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha b'richu, Le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'asei shalom aleinu v'el kol Yisrael, v'el kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. I would like to once again invite the Torah readers up to the Torah table. I'm not going to ask you to read again, so you can come up comfortably. You don't have to worry. Okay, you're probably not worried. You can just do it again right away.
actually inviting the Torah readers to come up and join us, and many of you actually are part of my choir, and since you've been tested, you can join me for the final song as well. That's part of it. Wish I could bring everybody up. But those singers who are part of the choir should come closer to me. Deborah and Beth and Anne. I don't see her. And should we bring our Baal Shofar too?
We'll do this first, and I'll call him up, give him his own separate, intro.
Excellent.
And so, we talk about the joy and the sweetness of a new year and the challenge to make it all it must be. And so let us do a motzi together, breaking bread. I'll cut it up. You can come up and get a piece directly after the service, as well as the apples and honey. But first, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. I'll cut the other half later, but in the meantime.
You can just join us.
The sweetness of a new year is made possible through so many people. And if you're going to turn around and look at the staff who's in the back and our crew, give them a round of applause if you would, please. They do all kinds of different places, all kinds of different events, and we appreciate how much you've taken the holiness of these particular days and have really conveyed it to our online congregation. It means so much, so thank all of you. And of course to our staff, Lori, who's in the back, assuming the position. Becky, who has headphones on or is getting something ready somewhere else. And really for everyone, of course, Susan, Jamie, people that have helped to really, all of the staff, each in their own ways. And I'm so glad to be able to share this with you. And so those of you who are willing and able, if you step up to this table, grab an apple. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu, may it be your will, Adonai our God, shetechadesh Eloheinu, Shana Tova U'Mtuka. May you grant us a year of sweetness and health and peace. Amen.
Amen.
You may dip. And now, I would like to invite up our Baal Tekiah, Zach Dekta.
You guys can stand around the microphone and come closer to the mic.
Ready with some blessings.
On the microphone, yeah.
Blessing?
Oh, yeah. That's my job.
We'll join you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar.
Are you ready, sir?
Yes.
Tekiah, Shavarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shavarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shavarim Teruah. Tekiah, Tekiah Gedolah. Here's your call.
All right.
Just a moment, we will exit to the back porch. If you registered for brunch, we welcome you. Your food will be waiting. If you didn't register, come say hello, but leave the food if you didn't sign up, because there got to be enough, and we ordered for the people that signed up. So in all and every event, Shana Tova Umtuka, a sweet, healthy new year to all of us. Shana Tova, Shana Tova.
This is your solo time, Jamie. Thank you. You guys were